my sweet friend. You have your coffee in hand.
I
Look
got the
at you.
coffee.
I had planned out, like, so if you're watching this on YouTube, which it will be available on YouTube, I had this bright pink shirt. I was like, I'm seeing my friend Sydney. She's so fun and colorful and full of life. And in the transporting of the cafe to my studio, I spilt it all over myself.
Oh
This is so a fun shirt, and you look exquisite, my dear. How are you?
I'm good. When I was getting dressed this morning, I was like, all right, we're talking about some playful things. And I was like, I feel a little bit like Bert from Mary Poppins after they jump into the chalk drawing, but I was like, this feels right. Let's do
Oh,
it.
I love the best scene ever. I still remember as a kid watching that, and like, I don't know if you did this or if it was just me. I would walk by, like, I would walk by a sidewalk as a child and be so tempted to be like, will this work? Will
Yeah. Can I
this work if I
push these
jump?
boundaries of time and space and
Oh, fun.
let's see if that Disney magic will come to life. Yeah, I totally get that.
And I still think there's a part of us that embraces that playful. It should embrace that playfulness. So again, thank you for joining me because that is what I think of even when I came across your content on social media for the first time, just how fun and playful and engaging, and that there's this spark that about you, the way that you show up on social media. And then when I had the chance to have our very first virtual cafe offline,
Hmm.
where we got to meet each other and found out we have a lot in common. So for
So much in common.
Oh, I know. So I've already given our listeners a little, very fast snippet of what we're going to talk about, but please tell us your story. What's your artistic background? How did you even become a voice teacher? And all the things that led up to where you are today.
Totally. Well, first off, thank you for those kind comments about my social media. That has been a journey, as I'm sure it is for anybody who's trying to figure out how to, you know, jump into that space and be honest and real there and all that stuff. My journey, I growing up with singing, I kind of had three different spaces that I think really shaped who I became as a singer and a human being. My dad was in the Air Force, so I grew up a military brat, and that had me moving around a lot. Um, we grew up going to church every single Sunday, so I was in a space where singing was a very key part of a religious framework that I had growing up and a community framework in that way. And I was super into music theater and community theater. It was something that I could do to get plugged in no matter where we moved. And so growing up, I feel like I had this rotation of, all right, we move every 2 years, but there's always a church somewhere, and there's almost always a theater outlet that I can get into. And some combination of these things had me growing up being like, I love singing. Singing is a place where I feel like it's easiest for me to be myself, oddly enough. Like, I think even today, I often have an easier time singing things than I have saying things. Like, it's easier for me to communicate what I really think when I'm singing versus when I'm talking about something. So singing was a space that I just really loved. My mom sang as well, and I think she really passed on her love of music to me. So I grew up, singing in the car with my mom and with my sister, and just kind of had from a young age, that really keen knack and ear for music. Like, I was the annoying kid that if my family was singing something in the car and like they just kind of burst into song, and if it wasn't in like the actual key from the recording, I'd be like, can we pause? Can we pause and can we start it here, because it's not
Oh
here.
boy.
And like weird little things like that, where like it was how I functioned, was singing, music, having that brain. So growing up, over time, it really became a question of, okay, how much is this hobby? How much is this something that I really want to pursue with like higher education and all of that? And I ended up going to Florida State University and getting their version of like their music business degree there. And I loved it. I had such a good time doing that. I think it confirmed for me being in any form of a, um, that higher education space, like getting to just deep dive into everything relating to music and then getting to do that even further for singing was such a joy and a delight. I think the question for me came out though that I was constantly trying to decide whether or not I wanted to pursue singing in the context of church ministry, which I had really, a lot of that had raised me up in singing. So I was like, are we heading in this direction? Or are we heading in more of like a full-time performance, music theatery, band, I don't know, something over in this path? And through college, I was constantly like feeling really tugged in both directions. And ended up after graduating from college, decided if I really want to figure out if I want to pursue full-time ministry, I'm going to go hop into a Bible college setting that has like a full music focus option. And so I went and did that for a little while and learned so many wonderful things from that space that I actually hadn't gotten in my 4-year degree that I was really thankful for. My 4-year degree had given me the opportunity to focus more on classical background of singing, but I was pretty sure that I didn't want to pursue a classical route, in most of the music that I was singing, as much as I loved it. I really wanted more contemporary training and focus for the different environments I knew I was probably going to be in. And oddly enough, when I went to Bible college, that is what I got. And it's one of the biggest things that I'm so thankful for was a period of time where I really started connecting the dots between some of the problems that I had constantly had trying to sing a lot of contemporary worship music with a very classical technique that gave me a great foundation, but did not help me stylistically interpret what I was trying to get into.
Exactly.
So I started connecting those dots, but came out of 4 years in ministry school going, I'm really glad that I did this. I've learned so much from it, but did it answer the full question for me of, is this where I want to track full time moving forward? And I think the biggest struggle I had was I was like, I spent so much time getting here and doing all of this, only for me to really be honest with myself and say, this isn't what I want to do. And I'm so scared to say that that's not what I want to do. But I took a leap and I decided to just start pursuing some other directions of work, figuring out what I was going to do with my singing in the meantime. And that led up to roughly around pandemic time. I had been working in hospitality and retail while singing in a band with my now husband, which I'm sure we'll talk about later.
Yes. Yes.
And the pandemic hit and it opened, I was furloughed from my job, and it opened up this window for me to go, you've got nothing but time to do whatever you want. And I had very briefly been dabbling back into voice teaching, which I had done during some of my time in Bible college. And I was like, is it time for me to really see what it would feel like for me to do this and start, coming back around to this idea that singing is the thing that has followed me around my entire life. I love it. And even more than loving doing it myself, I really love getting in conversation with other people about their voices, fostering that journey, recognizing all the things that come out of us when we start talking about our voices and start giving ourselves permission to express in that way. And so at the start of the pandemic, I was like, all right, I'm going to get a little bit more upskill around teaching itself. So I've got this hanging on my wall behind me. I did an online program with New York Vocal Coaching. They have a wonderful voice teacher training program, and met other voice teachers from all over the world. And I was like, okay, I think like, let's do this. Let's just see what happens. And I've spent the past 3 years like deep diving into teaching. I've gotten to teach online. I teach locally at our local high school with a performing arts school that's about half hour down the road. And I'm a 32-year-old performing artist who is really getting her feet wet in the world of what does it look like for me to share this joy of singing that I have with, whoever's currently coming across my path. And I'm kind of a growing teacher and loving it, loving it, loving it. So
You
that's a
come
full roundabout journey there.
That was beautiful because we can see the sparkle in your eye when you talk about it and hear it in your voice as well. Because you said something that was super important, which I think is really it's a nice little segue really into the heart of what we're talking about. You said something about singing and then teaching people how to sing, and then what that opens up for people when they talk about their singing. And
Mm-hmm.
something I know that is very important to the both of us that we both speak to in the online space, as well as we've encouraged each other with, is how we feel most like ourselves and providing brave spaces for our singers so that they feel most like themselves. And this is a topic of conversation that comes up a lot for voice teachers, is how similar voice teaching is to therapy, to any service
Mm-hmm.
based industry, right? Where
Yeah.
people are working on self improvement in some form or fashion. So for a singer, they're thinking of improving their singing technique or their voice, or all aspects of that, right? And so, how do you tie in your personal story into that space? You have such a wealth between like a business degree, yeah, classical, but really that's not me, working into the contemporary space, then into the church world, ministry world. There's so much richness you provide in your teaching space, for your singers, I imagine. And for you personally, how did you feel like you came alive when you started providing a space where others felt like they could when they sang? I know that may be a little ambiguous, but go from
No,
there. We'll break it down.
yeah. I think first off, I think what I initially really wanted to offer to singers was something that I felt like got offered to me at different stages and different times down the road of my own singing journey, which was when I was young, I had a natural talent for singing. That was great. But it took a lot of time for me to integrate and figure out what it's like having this relationship with myself as a human being alongside the relationship that I have with my voice and how they intersect with each other. Um, and I definitely, as a younger singer, it was very easy for me to be like, okay, well, I'm having my going about life and all the things that I'm doing. And then when I get into like a voice lesson, or if I'm working on singing, it's like I'm going to shut all these other things off and I'm just going to work on this thing that is my voice. And I can tweak it and pull it in all these different directions until I make it the thing I want it to be. And then I'm going to stick it back in me and hope that it all works. And I think that the older that I got and the more that I started getting encouraged that this, like, yes, are there practical ways that we have to allow ourselves to, in some way or form, detach a little bit to look at some things objectively about our voices? Yes. And at the same time, if you try to completely disconnect yourself from this thing that is physically inside of you, it's only going to make it more difficult throughout your process if you try to shut yourself off from the whole entire rest of who you are while you're working on this element of who you are. And I think that really rubber hit the road around that for me when I was in my 20s, again, trying to figure out what is the kind of music, what What are the kind of music? What is the kind of music that really brings me to life?
Mm.
And are there ways that I am trying to use my voice that I know doesn't necessarily feel as true to myself as it could be? Are there ways that I am getting into my singing that is really purely performing for somebody else or doing this because I'm afraid that if I don't use my voice in this way, somebody's going to think less of me? You know, going through that journey of starting to learn how to make my most true choices around the kind of things that I really wanted to sing, the kind of things that I really wanted to do with my time, all of that, all of those things rolled into one with my singing. So, in terms of when I sit down with another person and they're like, I want to work on my voice, I'm like, great. Tell me about you. Tell me about what you love to do. What do you not love to do? Like, how can I be somebody to reflect back to you um, what it is that you actually really enjoy most about being yourself? Because
Mhm.
that's going to be an integral part of the songs that we choose to work on, how we help you embrace what you do most naturally with your voice, and for you to feel okay celebrating those things that actually come most naturally to you, alongside those things that you do want to work on. Are those attached to anything that might not be the most helpful thing for you? It's so natural for us to want to work on different aspects of our voices, but if those things are tied to fears that aren't going to be helpful for you later on down the road, then we might want to look at that a little bit and navigate that. But that's a lot to have to, like, so what you're saying is that sometimes people relate a voice lesson or something a little bit to therapy. I think that's where it comes from, is because we have all of these internal things weaving through what we're trying to pick apart a little bit, and it can be wild.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And what often is the case is that when we take a moment to do a little bit of that self-exploration and to try to discover the root of where that fear, where that narrative came from, it requires vulnerability, which can be very
Mm,
scary for some people.
yeah, totally.
This is a question for you, and I'm not sure if we actually talked about this before. Are you the oldest with your
I'm
kids?
the youngest.
You're the youngest. Okay.
Mhm.
This can go either way because I find that there are some similarities in terms of the performative nature of your art and even
Mm,
of your personality, right? Like
sure.
I have two kids, so I have an oldest and the youngest. No one's in the middle. But I can see from both of them, even in they're artists in their own right. The oldest, I'm the oldest, where it's like the mama bear, no, it has to be this way,
Mhm.
that narrative or that story. And then I can see in my youngest, hi, I'm here, everybody, like vying for the attention a little bit. I know you're nodding
Uh-huh.
your head like, I feel attacked. No, just kidding.
That's me. Hello.
So what I'm finding is that even in both of those narratives, there is this pressure to be a little bit performative with our art. Whether it's I need to do this so that I seek your approval. Well,
Mhm.
actually, both can be true. I'm
Sure.
seeking
Oh,
your
yeah.
approval. The youngest wants to be seen, the oldest wants to be right, and so
Mhm.
for you, did you find that as you were doing this process of self discovery, whether it was in your educational journey, just in your life journey of making that pivot and saying, I made this investment of time and resources, but I really feel led in this new direction? Was there any sense of your younger self? Inner child work is a buzzword right now in therapy, but it's very relevant because we are digging deep and with these stories that we've created for ourselves that do go all the way back to how we were when we were kids. Did
Oh,
you
yeah.
find any of that true for you in your self-discovery process as a human being and as an artist?
100%. Yeah, 100%. So a little even more of my background. I'm the youngest. I have an older sister who is 4.5 years older than me. And I know she would be fine with me sharing this. When my mom was pregnant with me, my sister was diagnosed with leukemia
Oh,
at
wow.
age 4.5. And so when I was born, she was in the middle of chemo treatment, and like all of my baby pictures where she's holding me, like she's just growing her hair back, like she had had all of her hair fall out. And although I don't think I would have had any concept of this at the time, I feel like looking back and hearing my parents even share stories about what I was like when I was really little was that I was born into a really, really tough time for my family when there was a lot of, um, you know, just so much faith being extended and unassuredness and like working through that. And I was born and I was just kind of this little ray of sunshine. Um, who, being a baby, had no idea what was going on. But even through like my toddler years, my family has described me as just the most happy go lucky, joyful, wanting to reach out to everybody kind of little rainbow kid. And the older that I got, I think I slowly started kind of taking on a role as being like, oh, well, it's my job to make everybody happy. It wasn't my job to make to be right, kind of like what you're talking about. I think that my sister definitely has a little bit more of that. But me, I was like, well, when things are hard, I can make everybody laugh. And I'll probably say something weird that will make everybody laugh. And I'll be my quirky, creative, nobody quite gets me, but everybody thinks that, she's kind of a joy to have around. So yay, go her. Like that was kind of I started figuring out that that was what I felt like was my niche growing up. But again, when it then came time to um, make certain choices for myself as an adult, I had crippling fear of like losing relationships over making a decision for myself that felt right for me. Like, I mean, heaven help the sweet people that had to date me in my 20s, like before I met my husband. I'm sure that I was a nightmare to be within that situation, because it was very much like I had such a desire to have really deep connection with people. I loved like immediately getting into community with folks, but then I would hit this certain point where it was like, okay, I've found my way in. And some of this I think came from being a military kid as well, moving so often. I was like, I have a short window of time when I get into a new space to feel like I've really connected with people. Um, and I had to learn as a growing adult that like you you use your singing sometimes to find your way in and to find it quickly and to be like, hey, I'm nice. Have a nice voice. Put me on your team. Put me in, coach. I'm ready to play. But then when I'd hit that spot where it was like, am I going to show something about myself that maybe these people won't like? I would start having a really hard time. I'd have like anxiety, I would have panic attacks, and I had to cross over this threshold of being like, you're somewhere in this, you're going to have to really be okay with the possibility that you might sing a song that someone thinks is stupid. You might, partake in something that somebody even looks at you and says, I don't think what you're doing is right. And you'll have to be like, well, okay, then. That was incredibly hard for me. And, I know I've talked with a number of singers that I've worked with who, um, they've been having to work against that conflict from day one. And I'm always like, how can I learn more from your ability to get into that kind of conflict? Because that came much, much harder for me. So yeah, that inner child work and having to learn how the environments that raised you, your order in the stack of things, if you have siblings, those things can definitely, I think, play a real part into, especially as it comes to singing, how you think about the role of your voice, how you think about the role of being a performer, et cetera, et cetera. So many different things there.
Yeah, absolutely. My gosh, I'm like nodding my head so hard at what you're saying because I've lived that and I've experienced it. And the core of even my own personal therapy work has been inner child work and untangling those narratives and being the happy. I totally get happy girl because that was part of my mama bear persona too, to
Hmm.
protect my two younger brothers and then to be the bridge between them and my parents with whatever they had going on, right? And everybody had to be, yeah, we're gonna fix it. We're gonna fix it. So yeah, I totally get that. And yay therapy and the good soul work that we've done, even through the medium of music making to help us get there. Now, this is a hard question, but it's something I want us to think about because I know I say hard because there's not one formula for every singer because we're all different and unique. But can you think of a moment, a breakthrough moment with one of your singers or even for yourself where you saw the connection? It's like, okay, like I am singing to my inner child. I'm giving myself permission to be unapologetically me when I show up either in this voice lesson space or on stage. Can you think of a moment either for yourself or with one of your fabulous singers?
Oh, there's countless numbers, I think, with some of my singers, which makes it harder to parse out just one. I think for myself, it was one of those moments was coming out of the time that I'd had in Bible college. Again, I grew up loving music theater. I think if I had to pick one genre, I mean, that's such a wide genre. There's so many things that fall under it. But if I think about the kind of music that I feel like immediately brings me back to the heart of myself,
Mm.
it is anything having to do with music theater, very honestly. And growing up as a kid who also participated so much in church, I really struggled with that honest feeling. I was like, I feel like if I said this out loud to some of the people who watch me lead worship, they would be very confused. And I get that there may be some people listening that, aren't involved in anything church world or don't have any, particular religious background there. But there, although nobody ever said outright to me, it is better for you to sing, this music in church and for God than it is for you to sing anything else. Nobody ever outrightly said that to me, but I think I internalized that somewhere along the line. And so going all throughout Bible college, there were people that were on our worship team in church that were involved in like community theater and all these different things. And I remember watching them and being like, I miss that. I miss that so badly, but I didn't have time for it at the time when I was studying. When I finished, and I had gone to college overseas and I came back home and I had some time and I went and auditioned for a musical. I went and auditioned for a community theater production of Little Shop of Horrors. And oddly enough, that was the last musical I had been in when I was 13 years old. I had been in that show when I was 13, and I had not done anything music theater since then. And I was 26 at this point. And I remember going in and singing for my audition for that show and being like, how does what just happened? Like I left the room and I just remember weeping, absolutely weeping and being like, I'd forgotten what it felt like for me to sing something that felt that true to myself. And it was really hard to acknowledge that because there's so many different kinds of music that I think that we can connect with and everything. But I do think that there is a piece to being able to give yourself permission to sing that thing that for whatever reason you're like, I don't know why, but I really want to try to sing this. I think that it's crucial for anybody to give yourself permission to do that at least once. Because if you do that, whether you feel like you're even the best at singing it or not, if that clicks something over for you where you have given yourself that opportunity to express yourself that honestly, all of a sudden you walk through the rest of your life and you're like, I feel like I can speak truth to anybody. Like, I feel like I can communicate with people better just because I gave myself permission to do this. So, that audition for me was a true turning point in me overcoming some fears that I had had, like I've talked about, of I'm afraid to talk to people about this part of myself or that part of myself. I started finding that I was just able to engage in conversation with various people a lot more freely and a lot more easily because I, gave myself that experience. So, yeah.
Wow, and hallelujah that you did. I'm like
Whee!
smiling so big. It's yeah. I mean, that is the kind of freedom and joy that I think we all desire as voice teachers for the artists that we work with. And in a teaching space or just as a colleague space, we desire for all humans to be able to walk in that type of confidence and courage in what they feel led and called to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, was it at that point that you also like allowed yourself to explore some other mediums of music? Because there's also another cool project thing that you're a part of. You are a newlywed, so please dish, tell us all the things.
Yes.
You're I think one of the first posts I saw you post was about this really cool band that you're in. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes. And this is a great segue point because it was not long. It was pretty much right after that audition. And being in that show, I did get into that show. Right after I came out of Little Shop of Horrors, um, I had a mutual friend that was like, I know this guy who's in this band and he's putting on this show. Do you want to go? And I was like, sure. I was new to Austin, Texas, which is where I live, and was like, I'd love to go see some live local music. Let's go check it out. And we went and I watched this guy in this band on stage, and I was like, kind of floored. I was like, this is insanely good. This is really good. The writing is really good. The sound is so fun. I wasn't like, I was expecting to have a good time, but I wasn't expecting to have this kind of a good time. Like, this is
That's
amazing.
awesome.
And we chatted afterward, and the lead guy in that band is now my husband, Cole Burris. And the band is called Goons. And after that show, we were all sitting around and chatting, and me and another friend were joking with them. We said, how much would we have to, pay you to be in your band? Not expecting, that we would get the following answer, which was Cole said, well, my brother's actually about to head off to college, and we've got a couple openings we're trying to figure out what to do with. We've got practice next week on Thursday, so just come hang out and let's see if it's a good fit.
Love it.
And so the following week, I showed up at this practice, and you have to understand, at this point, I was still, I had given myself permission to be back in the world of music theater, but I was still really working through the fact that I had given myself permission to step away from anything music leadership in relationship to church world. I had grown up in an environment that was very much like, if you're going to be, especially a female on stage singing in a church environment, you need to be XYZ, blah, 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 blah. Like a whole list of the things that there needed, and understandably so. I think there was a lot of good boundary around what it looked like to be a female worship leader on stage in that environment. And I had stepped away from that for a while to go, what do I really want to do? Now this door of opportunity opens to say, okay, get on stage in a very 80s style pop rock environment where you can practically do almost anything that you want. And I was very tentative in the beginning. I was like, I know that I have the skill set to vocally do what I might need to do in this space, but I'm not 100% sure what the reception is going to be if I do this. Like, it was just going to be very different from what I had told myself for a very long time. If you want to be accepted, you got to look like this. So I started testing out the waters in this band, and first started off just singing background vocals And then we ended up going on tour about a year later and
Cool.
had the absolute time of my life. I could not believe how much fun I had touring with, again, Cole and our friend William, who plays bass. We just had the absolute best time playing for both rooms absolutely full of people to rooms that only had like 5 people who had showed up. But it was that consistency of we made some of the most wonderful connections with people on the road, wonderful conversations. And for me, it was recognizing that everything that I had loved about leading worship in church and the connections that it made with other people, the joy that it brought people, the inspiration and encouragement that it brought, I was finding some of that same fruit, some of the exact same fruit happening in this space where, we're singing about hopping in the car and going for a late night joyride and, and having this whole 80s vibe. There was so much wonderful joy and connection coming out of that space. And for me, that was what really tipped it over the edge of being like, all right, I'm giving this the fullness of my creativity. I'm not holding myself back from this anymore. Let's go. And I started songwriting with Cole, and eventually down the road, we started dating and we got married back in November. We've put out 2 albums. We're building a school bus that we're turning into a tiny home on wheels for us to take around and play the music. And if you had told me even 5 years ago that I would be at this kind of place with my artistry, I would not have believed you. 5 years ago, I was so scared and so insecure that the combination, I think, of being in this band and teaching at the same time and watching those things flow in and out and back and forth, I'm just so incredibly thankful and grateful for the opportunity to be getting to do both and what it's creating in my world right now. It's wild to me. It's true.
Gosh, it is so encouraging to hear. And I know people listening to this, it'll just give them a jolt of energy. Just hearing, I'm like, yes, oh my gosh, yes, do the thing, like cheering for you. And if you do live in the Austin area, like go check them out. And, when I will put all your details in the show notes and stuff as well. And so when you think of this out of the box type of living, right? You've had now the courage to step out. And I totally, fully believe, and I know you adopt this as well, that all of your life experiences have led you to this point. Mm-hmm. And yes, you needed to pour the money into Florida State. You needed to pour the money into Bible college, to be able to savor the journey and realize it wasn't for me, how things have evolved for you, right? Mm-hmm. So that you have this, let's do the thing. Let's do the thing. So what are some of the other cool creative things on the table do you have right now with your hubby? Because there's one thing in particular that I find so cool and maybe something unexpected, So can you tell us a little bit about that project?
Yes. Talk about very unexpected. So Goons, our band, had been kind of solidifying itself for a couple of years. And then the pandemic again hit. And with live performances outside of like live streaming, most of our show opportunities that we had went kaput. And we were trying to figure out what to do with our music at the time. And we were collaborating on different things at home and, figuring out what we wanted that to look like. But we have a wonderful friend named Zach Freeman, who was also from the Austin area. And we were just catching up one day and we got onto the conversation of animation and cartoons and how much we, all the different cartoons that we loved growing up. And we started tickling around. Is that a weird phrase? Well, the idea tickled us to go, what would happen if we took Goons as a concept, which is this fun 80s vibrant, kind of style sound, what would happen if we put that as the backdrop to an animated cartoon? And this is a group of three creative people just completely throwing. This is how it starts, is you have to be willing as a creative person to go, somebody's got to be willing to throw out the most outrageous idea if we're going to see it happen. Like any of the Disney animated films that you see happen because a room full of normal people sat down and said, what would happen if? And then you find a way to do it. And that's what we have learned with this project. We started making something that we call Goons Cartoon. And Zach, who is a writer and director and has a lot of different connections within the animation and film world, he started reaching out to some people that he knew. We gathered up a team, and Cole and I wrote a potential theme song for what would be this animated series. And we created a fully animated music video as a proof of concept for what we hope to eventually see become a fully animated series. Whether that's something that we end up doing independently or through a company, we don't know yet. But we made it because we wanted to. And that has been one of the most like purely indulgent, as having grown up like a Disney kid, and like half of the songs that raised me were like from animated films. Seeing yourself become an animated cartoon character is one of the absolute like most badass things that has ever happened to me. Like truly, it was so fantastic. So it's been fun.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And I actually did see the proof of concept cartoon on your Instagram account and was geeking out myself because it took me back to Saturday mornings with my brothers. I mean, growing up. And so, oh my gosh, I am rooting for you guys so, so much. So I want you to tell everybody, even though it's going to be in the show notes, but tell us where we can follow you as an artist, your studio, the cartoon, the band, all the things.
Absolutely. I feel like best place to track me down is probably on Instagram still these days. My teaching and singing adventures all happen on my Instagram at singing Sydney, singing with Sydney. And you can follow Goons, our band, at Goon Vibes Only. And the cartoon, you can also find through Goon's page, but the cartoon has its own page as well. Everything's got its own page. You can follow the cartoon at Goon's Cartoon, or at the Goon's Cartoon. I need to look that up. I'll make sure that you have the correct thing in the show notes.
Yeah, we will put it in there for sure. For sure.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, Sydney, thank you so much. This is such again, I hope people are just like, yes, like really, I can do that. Yes, you can. And even if you're listening to this thinking, my idea is too outrageous, I promise that there's somebody in the world that they need to consume whatever it is you're coming up with. So thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with me and to share a virtual coffee. Before we go, can we play a little rapid fire? Is that okay with
let's do it. I love a little rapid fire.
I mean, I may know the answer to this, but coffee or tea, my dear?
A coffee. I love tea as well, but let's be real. It's coffee for me.
Coffee, coffee, coffee. How do you take your coffee, my dear?
If it's a latte, it's an oat milk latte with hazelnut. And if it's like a normal drip coffee, just with a splash of like oat milk or almond milk in it.
I love it. That's kind of like how I roll too. Hazelnut's one of my favorite flavors. Awesome. All right. Latest Netflix, Amazon, or streaming binge right now. Are you a TV watcher?
Oh, I am. And I feel like realistically, the thing that I actually have watched the most is X-Files. Totally X-Files. Cole and I went on like a full X-Files like bonanza across the pandemic. And then the other day we were like, what do we want to watch? And there was like, let's go back and watch X-Files again. We have an entire music video that's like based off of X-Files as well. So yeah, it's kind of it's our nerdy thing for sure.
Well, you know what? That's providing probably inspiration and storyboarding for the Goons cartoons. So
Very
I could
true.
totally see it. Who is somebody we could find on your playlist right now?
Yeba. Yeba. 100% Yeba. I swear. I'm waiting for another album. I'm still living off of her 2021 album Dawn. I cannot get enough of her and everything that she's doing and the way she's doing it. I love her to pieces. I think she's wonderful.
I love it. Love it. Thank you so much, my dear Sydney. You are such a joy. I count it a blessing to have connected with you. And I know our listeners will feel the same. So thank you again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This has been such a pleasure. And yeah, anybody who's listening, just go do what you want to do. It's don't wait for anybody else to give you permission. If you decide that you want to give it a go, you can do it. Just go for it.
Amen.